today.
Programming on WTTW is made possible in part by viewers like you and by the following.
It started with a crown, then a bridge, then dentures. But you kept losing teeth and keeping pain. Dental implants are a permanent, custom-made answer to decay and loss, the closest thing to having your real teeth. Eon Clinics keeps the entire process under one roof, with a team that works together to make you feel at home so you can have more to give to the people you love.
WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center.
Next time on Midsummer Murders.
Seems the area around these woods is a UFO hotspot.
A woman is killed with a mysterious material.
What is this stuff?
I have absolutely no idea.
As Barnaby and Nelson investigate,
This was a UFO, was it? It was an alien craft.
another strange event occurs.
It was hunting me.
Find out the truth
Cooper Hill seems to be a hot destination for aliens.
on Midsummer Murders.
Saturday at 7 on WTTW.
Next time on Death in Paradise.
Francis died from the poison water hemlock.
What the hemlock?
A reenactment group's stew is poisoned and one of them is killed.
How did Francis consume more poison than any of the others?
Death in Paradise.
Saturday at 9:30 on WTTW.
I'm Sister Mary Lou Rydell, Maryknoll's sister. Gloria Tamayo. You're watching WTTW.
Tonight's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Mollenhauer Progressive Philanthropic Fund in honor of Ida Mollenhauer, supporting quality journalism.
Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. Chicago Public School children will have the day off 1 week from today. The mayor announces a school district will cancel classes Friday, November 12th to allow families an opportunity to get the COVID-19 vaccine for their children. This after the CDC approved vaccinations for kids 5 through 11 years old. And today, as you see here, Lurie Children's Hospital began vaccinating kids in that age group and held a Q&A session for parents who had questions about the vaccine's safety and efficacy. More Americans are going back to work. The U.S. Labor Department announces employers added 531,000 jobs last month. That's the most since July. The report shows the unemployment rate fell to 4.6% from 4.8% in September. That said, the country is still lagging behind where it was before the pandemic hit in March of 2020, when the jobless rate was 3.5%. And indeed, it is that time of year. Don't forget to turn the clocks back this weekend as daylight savings time officially ends Sunday, November 7th at 2 a.m. The debate over whether to abolish the time change rages on seemingly everywhere, although today Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle says the occasion is also a good one for residents to change out batteries and their smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are John Seidel of the Chicago Sun-Times, Greg Hines of Crain's Chicago Business, and Chicago's Journalist of the Year, Kelly Bauer of Block Club Chicago. Congratulations to you, Kelly. We hope to be joined by Ravi Beshwal of ABC 7 during the program, but in the meantime, let's get right into it. Greg Hines, let's start with Kyle Rittenhouse, the Antioch native, on trial up in Kenosha, just over the border. Remind us of the backstory here and the stakes in this trial.
Well, the backstory is that Kyle Rittenhouse, then 17, decided to, in effect, be his own cop. He decided in the middle of the riots last summer to go up to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and to patrol around to protect the neighborhood and to, on the side, offer a little medical treatment for people. But in the process, he brought himself a gun, even though he didn't legally apparently have the right to own the gun. And he shot and killed some people. That's the backstory. And the question is whether he was, as he says, in fear of his life from these dangerous rioters, or whether he was in effect a self-appointed vigilante who decided to deal out his own form of justice.
And he was saying he was up there to guard property, although the owner of a used car lot that he was ostensibly guarding said, "I never asked for anyone to come up and do that." John Seidel, we've had some strange things happen so far. The judge in this case has been unusually vocally public, and we've had a juror dismissed for making a crude joke. Is that kind of unusual for such a high-profile case?
Well, yeah, and I would say it's not off to a great start. No, it's interesting. You know, the judge received a lot of criticism over this ruling about whether or not the people who were shot and killed by Rittenhouse can be referred to as victims. I'll just say, I mean, that's a ruling I feel like I've heard before. I know I've heard before in other cases, and my understanding is that legal experts in Wisconsin have said that that is a solid ruling. But the judge has seemed to really not appreciate the criticism that he's received about it in the media, and want to let everybody know that this is that's the law in Wisconsin, and those are the rules. And you know, I should say I wasn't there, but I've been following our colleagues who are covering the trial, and I do have a little trouble thinking of a time when I've seen or heard a judge respond to media criticism in quite that way. From time to time they'll call us out. From time to time there'll be remarks about accuracy, but it sounds like he went on at length about that. And then there was, of course, the note from a juror that was made a joke about Jacob Blake. That was a seated juror, is my understanding,
right,
who's since been dismissed. But that's got to cause some concern, I think, including from the attorneys who let him through onto the jury.
Right, and the judge seemingly agreed with that dismissal right away. Kelly Bauer, talk about sort of the political ramifications here. The judge says we don't want any politics to infect what's going on here. This is simply about, you know, a guy and a gun killing two people. But what do you think about that?
Yes, this came when we saw uprisings all throughout the summer. After the murder of George Floyd, there was looting and there were protests all over the country. And this is what happened in kind of that aftermath. And it's been one of the most high-profile incidents to come about from that. So it has been highly politicized. A lot of people, you know, feel that this is really playing into that divisiveness we've seen as a country, is that we kind of have these people who think that they are helping out, that they're protecting businesses, but then we also had people who were just peacefully protesting, and they clashed, and now we're seeing the ramifications of that.
And certainly all of us here have, over the last couple of years, covered protests that sort of had all of these elements in them, perhaps not shooting and killing. Let's move back closer to home. John Seidel, Oak Park native Heather Mack. She was arrested at O'Hare after spending time in jail in Bali for the murder of her mother. And her defense here is saying, well, there's double jeopardy at play, that the United States feds have no case. Does the Mack defense have a case here?
The attorneys that I've talked to don't think so, but I mean, we're going to wait and see. I mean, first of all, when I spoke to her attorney Tuesday night, he was full of rhetoric and saber rattling, saying that this was going to be a war. He didn't so much talk about double jeopardy, and pretty much any attorney that I've talked to said that double jeopardy doesn't apply here in the terms of constitutional protection. It's two different sovereigns. The United States has a right to go forward with this. He was talking about a section of the United States Code. Again, the lawyers that I've talked to said that section that he's talking to, the protection against a second prosecution in the United States, only applies to that section of the code, and which is not where she's charged, and even then there are some exceptions. So, and we haven't really heard from. I haven't spoken to him since the indictment came down. From what I've heard, he said similar things to others. So. We'll wait and see. You know, if this were to go to trial, which I'm suspect of, the evidence I think is pretty overwhelming against her.
Certainly seems like it might be a far-fetched defense. Let's move on to what's happening at the Park District. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is feeling the pressure to oust Chicago Park District Board President Avis Lavelle after 2 investigations found a culture of abuse that was allowed to fester at Park District pools and beaches. Take a look.
One of the really sad things for me is that these women tried to do the right thing, and it went unheard. The ball got dropped at several levels.
Kelly Bauer, there was an internal investigation that was released that led to the ouster of 3 Park District officials. Obviously, former CEO Mike Kelly is gone. He's implicated in this report. Why so much heat on the board president, Avis Lavelle?
I think that this is coming because it feels like this culture, it was described as a frat house-like culture in the lifeguard program, was just allowed to go on for so long, even when younger lifeguards were trying to report this. And now what the investigation found is that it was just sort of allowed to fester, that officials knew about this, knew about the allegations of sexual harassment and abuse, and didn't do anything, didn't act, even when pressured to. And most recently, what it's shown is that when Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx started an investigation into it with her office, that Avis Lavelle, the president of the Park District Board, then texted Kim Foxx and asked if they could talk. So it raises questions about what did she want to chat about? Could it be that anything improper was going to happen? So that's certainly putting some pressure on Mayor Lightfoot.
And the pressure also coming from a handful of alder people on city council calling for her to step down. Greg Hines, what do you think Lavelle's going to do? She's been around Chicago politics for many years, we should mention.
Avis has been around forever. I knew Avis when she worked for WGN, and then she was Richard M. Daley's press secretary. Then she later went into private consulting business to make some money. There's really 2 questions here. One is whether she knew about what happened and failed to do something about it. And then did she adequately do her job as board chairman in supervising Mr. Kelly and the rest of the staff? Because that is ultimately what the board is supposed to do. The board's in charge. The special counsel hired by the Park District, I've read through the report a couple times, and it does not appear to me that Avis knew, at least according to that report, before anybody else knew, essentially before it went public. And that's what she said, that I wasn't told. It's conceivable. She wouldn't be the first board chair snookered by their CEO. CEOs in the business world generally run their boards.
I'm reminded of Chicago Public Schools, Greg, and the whole soup scandal with former CEO Barbara Byrd Bennett, where it just seems like the board they had no clue what was happening.
Well, that raises the second point that maybe she's more palpable on Paris, and that is, did she do her job in supervising him? You would expect she would have some idea. The depth of the improprieties here, it's really severe. I mean, some of the if I had hair, it would curl having read some of the stuff that happened. But I think it's fair to ask whether the board did its job.
John Seidel, as Kelly mentioned, the state's attorney is probing this. Do you expect more shoes to drop here?
Well, certainly that's where it could lead to. It's unclear to me that being a state court matter, the Cook County State's attorney, but it's been a roiling thing. I mean, I definitely think that this story is not going away, so we can see.
Definitely not. Another story not going away is, of course, the Loretto Hospital story, which, Kelly, you reported this week that now the FBI is probing all of those VIP shots that it was improperly giving that you reported several months ago. What do you know about what the FBI is looking into?
Yeah, so back in March, we first reported that people at Trump Tower had been vaccinated even though they were ineligible. And of course, one of the hospital's top executives lived at Trump Tower. We then showed that other places he was associated with had gotten shots, like a jewelry store and a steakhouse in the Gold Coast. Since then, the mayor called for an independent investigation into their vaccines. Loretto actually lost access to vaccines for a while. And now the Illinois Attorney General's office is even investigating at the hospital. So this week, with my partner at the BGA, David Jackson, we reported that the FBI is investigating Loretto's vaccine program, that 2 subpoenas were issued to the Illinois Department of Public Health, and they're trying to get more information about who was vaccinated on 2 days in March, one of which was certainly the day that people were vaccinated at Trump Tower. So we're trying to dig a little deeper into that and figure out how far-reaching this investigation is and what they're trying to get at.
And Greg Hines, I seem to recall Mayor Lightfoot and CDPH announcing they were going to do an investigation. They halted vaccine administrations at Loretto Hospital, and then they came out with the conclusion, which, as I recall, was a whole lot of nothing. You think maybe they missed a few things here?
Maybe they missed a few things, or maybe the FBI was better positioned to find out what actually happened, Paris. I don't know, but it does sound like we're finally going to get to the bottom here of this and find out whether something illegal as opposed to stinky happened.
And Kelly, as you mentioned, Mayor Lightfoot says, yeah, the city is cooperating. Governor Pritzker says, yep, Illinois Department of Public Health. So what would investigators be looking at with these state and city agencies?
Yes, so the officials that we've spoken to, the experts who have a history in looking at this, have said that the FBI doesn't come poking around just because they think something unethical happened. They investigate because they think that maybe something illegal happened. So we do think, this is part of a criminal investigation, being the FBI, and we are trying to find out exactly what they would be probing for, what could have happened that was illegal around these vaccinations that were done.
Well, let's talk about not only unethical but illegal. John Seidel, former Illinois State Rep Luis Arroyo, pleads guilty in federal court to one charge of wire fraud. Remind us what this is in connection with.
Right. This came down almost 2 years ago. It was Luis Arroyo was charged with bribery and accused of trying to bribe a state senator to support legislation regarding the sweepstakes video gaming machine. And at the time, not only did these charges end Luis Arroyo's political career, but it was also quickly revealed, we confirmed and other media confirmed that the state senator who was not named in the complaint was Terry Link. Terry Link denied it. And of course, he has since been charged and pleaded guilty to a tax count. So this has been brewing for about 2 years. A year ago, a relative of former assessor Joe Barrios was also added to the case. He was somebody who was also involved in those meetings with Arroyo and Link. And so now Arroyo did this week enter what's called a blind plea. There was no deal with the government, but he did plead guilty to generally the allegations that have been hanging over his head for the last 2 years. So he's pleaded guilty. He has a sentencing, I think, early next year. But his co-defendant, James Weiss, still has the charges are still pending against him.
So you're saying it's a blind plea. It means that he's not necessarily cooperating with the government on any other investigation or might have knowledge of something else that could lead to some other indictment?
Right, which is something that obviously we always look for in these cases. No, there's no formal deals, just entered a blind plea. Normally, if there's a formal plea agreement, there might be talk about cooperation and breaks at sentencing on those things. We didn't have that with Arroyo here.
All right, more legal news. Fast Eddie Verdoliak, former Alderman Ed Verdoliak, finally has to report to prison Greg Hines. He was able to escape that because of COVID and health concerns, although his lawyers now argue that if he goes, he's still at risk of getting sick and dying. Is that a plea that's going to keep him out of jail, you think?
I don't think so, Paris. He did it. He's going to do the time. I'm frankly, what mystifies me is that how they finally caught him. I mean, Fast Eddie didn't get the nickname Fast Eddie for nothing. The feds, you would think, and various law enforcement agencies have been after him forever.
Didn't he famously say, I talk to everyone as if they're wearing a wire?
Yeah. Money and power always seem to gravitate to him, as well as some kind of funky relationships. But they finally got it, which goes to prove, I guess, that if you keep working at it, you get your guy. The question now really is whether two other folks who are kind of peers of his in terms of age are going to go down too. Eddie Burke, the former Alderman, faces a bunch of charges. He's going to go to trial, and we're all waiting to see if Mike Mack, the former Speaker of the House, is going to be indicted.
And but he was implicated, obviously, in that major ComEd indictment as public official A, the former Speaker of the House. So it certainly bears watching.
The old gang ain't what it used to be.
Let's move on to what's happening with McDonald's here. Activists are calling for the ouster of McDonald's CEO Chris Kempczinski after his text messages to the mayor, who we saw earlier at McDonald's headquarters, came to light. In the text, he criticized the parents of children who were shot, including 7-year-old Jaslyn Adams, who was killed in a McDonald's drive-thru, and 13-year-old Adam Toledo. And so the text here, Chris Komchinsky says, P.S. Tragic shootings last week, both at our restaurant yesterday and with Adam Toledo. With both, the parents failed those kids, which I know is something you can't say, even harder to fix. And Mayor Lightfoot said in response, quote, great to see you in person, such a great workspace, and your folks were terrific. I said to Joe I would be happy to reach out to the operator to offer support. He and his team members have got to be traumatized. Terrible tragedy. Thanks again, Chris. So the mayor not really calling the CEO out there for those comments. Kelly Bauer, is there a PR problem here, A, for McDonald's and B, for the mayor?
Oh, absolutely, particularly for McDonald's. Even just this week on Wednesday, I believe, there was a rally outside their headquarters in the West Loop where people were saying that the CEO should step aside or should be removed from his position. I think people find it very problematic. This is a very old thing that people bring up, is that the parents are to blame in these instances. But Jaslyn was just a young woman, a girl who was in a car at the wrong moment at the right time, at the wrong time. She was with her family, was not an intended target, and was shot dead. So I think people do see some racial coding to these messages, and I think it brings up a lot of concerns.
Greg Hines, what about that? Is there a PR fallout that McDonald's has to sort of manage here?
Oh, absolutely, Paris. We live in an era when everything becomes public in a big hurry.
And these texts, we should mention, were brought to light because of a Freedom of Information request to the mayor's cell phone. But go ahead, Greg.
I understand where the man is coming from. I think it's fair to ask in cases like this, particularly the one, where were the parents? Did they do their supervision? Did they fall down on the job? But you ought to be smart enough in this era not to put sensitive things in writing, because if it's in writing, it's going to come out, particularly when you're dealing with a public official. That was a mistake, and he and his company are not going to pay a price for it.
All right, well, let's move on to the Chicago Police Department. 5 more convictions related to disgraced former police sergeant Ronald Watts were vacated this week. There's been so many that State's Attorney Kim Foxx has vacated. John Seidel, could you fill us in a little bit on the backstory here with Ronald Watts and why these convictions have been vacated?
Yeah, sure. So Ronald Wallace was a police officer who about a decade ago with a fellow junior officer was accused and convicted of, so they patrolled the Ida B. Wells public housing complex, and instead of protecting the residents there, they were shaking down drug dealers for drugs and money, and then protecting them, and it was payoffs. And so he was convicted and did time, and in the meantime, there's been fallout because so many of the cases, when those who didn't cooperate with him, there would be planting of drugs or false charges. And so ever since the conviction, there has been, they've been going through the old cases to see, if there was any legitimacy to any of them. And so we've seen, I think, several mass exonerations related to Ronald Watts already. I think there were totaling more than 100, but I know they were hoping for a lot more in this latest hearing and only received 5. There's also, I should say, lots of a massive bit of litigation at the federal building related to Ronald Watts. So it's just one of those things, and I hear judges talk about it a lot. The concern when police officers violate the integrity of their badge. I mean, this is what the fallout of it is, and we've seen it with other police officers charged, convicted of corruption charges too.
And I think there are groups that are calling for something like 88 or more convictions to be vacated, tied to Ronald Watts. We'll see where that goes. I want to talk about the proposal for a Chicago casino. 5 bids by 3 companies. 2 of those companies had 2 different possible sites. Kelly Bauer, any one of those bids have the upper hand at this point?
I'm not sure about an upper hand. Mayor Lightfoot had a news conference this morning where she was asked about that. She deflected, didn't really want to say which one she thought might be favored. But I think it is interesting to note that one of the proposals, I believe, is near the Michael Reese site, even though people had been promised that there would not be a casino that would be blocking that site. And so that's an interesting twist.
Yeah, and I think the 4th Ward Alderwoman Sophia King, who represents that area, said, please don't bring it here. Not in our backyard. Did she not?
Yes, she said that she didn't want it there. Residents said they didn't want it there. But now we see one of these proposals is for that area. So it'll be interesting to see if they do take that into consideration, what residents and the alderwoman asked for.
All right, so Greg Hines, the companies here, you've got Bally's, they want to make a big, giant casino resort. Well, they all want to make casino resorts. You've got Hard Rock, and then you've got the local company, Rivers Casino. Is there any extra love for the local folks?
Maybe, Paris. I think the one of these bids that maybe is worth watching particularly closely, it's a little early to call him a front runner, but they may have a little something, is Neil Blum, the Chicago billionaire casino operator, wants to take the old Lakeside Center, current Lakeside Center, McCormick Place, which is the easternmost building. It's dilapidated. It's fallen apart. The agency that runs McCormick Place says that they need $400 million to rehab it. Well, if they can get Mr. Bloom to spend the $400 million and get some income from it off leasing it, it's off to its side. It's kind of an island. It doesn't have the kind of NIMBY problem that the truck yard one does. It's well served by public transportation. There's two questions. One is, will other Chicago convention people who really don't want a casino right next to the convention center, can they be convinced to go along with it? Maybe. They seem to get along with, have a lot of conventions in Vegas. The other question is whether lakefront preservationists, the folks who killed the Lucas Museum and opposed the Obama Presidential Center, whether they can tie this up. Interestingly, Friends of the Parks, which was very active in the Lucas Museum thing, they had told me that, well, we're not taking new property here. We're taking an existing building and rehabbing it. Maybe we'll stay neutral.
Well, there's certainly been a lot of people that wanted to tear down that old Lakeside Center and turn that into Lakeside Park. Before we go here, Greg, I got to ask you about Rahm Emanuel, his ambassador nomination in Senate committee. 2 Republicans voted against him, 2 Democrats voted against him. Will there ever be a full Senate vote here, given that Senator Ted Cruz keeps bottling up these nominations?
Ever is a long time, so I would say yes. And my prediction would be that while all the Democrats aren't going to vote for Mr. Emanuel, some Republicans will. I don't think this nomination is in trouble. I expect that at some point it's going to pass.
And we also heard from Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who said that he's not running again. Tell CNN this week, well, he might run for Illinois governor, he might run for Senate, even president in 2024. Greg, which of these is most likely?
I'm not sure any of them are likely. Paris, I will say this, that if you want to get a gig as, say, a talk show host, being considered a possible presidential candidate, it's going to get you a lot of notice and maybe some attention.
Maybe, and he's also running a political PAC and makes a lot of TV
being
appearances.
A candidate helps you do all of that.
Anyone want to say anything about Aaron Rodgers, our friend to the north that comes and owns our favorite football team?
What comes around goes around.
Don't all jump at once. We'll see how that goes. And we're out of time, so our thanks to John Seidel, Greg Hines, and Kelly Bauer. And that's our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, and then immediately after that, Chicago Tonight Black Voices at 6:30. You can also see the Voices program Sundays starting at 10 p.m. And then we're back at 7 o'clock, of course, all next week. Now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Hope we get some of that mild weather this weekend so you can enjoy it. And we'll see you next week.